How's it going, Laser Bruces? I'm Bobby Sixkilla. Welcome back to Divine Deception. We are still continuing down our assassin path, who turns out to be Odin, one of Odin Dicema's children, Devin Dicema. Because we can't unlock any of the other three that we've been working on. Every time I get to a point, I move to a subsidiary one, and then I get to another point, and then I have to move to another subsidiary one, and we haven't got the keys we need to keep moving on. So, Act 4 of Devin Dicema's story, I guess. The weapon. Slowly and methodically, I flipped the kunai in my hand. It had been a while since I had this thing on me, but recent events had reminded me of it, and I decided to grab it out of my closet back at my place. I'd forgotten how relaxing it was to flip it around like this. It was nice, doing something with my hands. Felt like I was keeping myself occupied. With something to do. Keep my mind occupied. Well, they said you needed a hobby, I guess. Flipping a kunai is a hobby. Kept it from spiraling. And believe me, I wasn't far from spiraling right now. I mean, Jesus Christ, how worthless was I? Outmaneuvered by a lowly, conniving piece of shit like Locke. I was never smart, but at the very least, I used to be able to kill properly. Now I can't even do that. The one thing I was meant for. The one thing I could claim as my own skill set. Worthless. Worthless, worthless, worthless. It was depressing, knowing just how fucking devoid of value I really was, deep down. Utterly unable to even do the simplest of tasks. And falling for that briefcase stunt, I didn't even learn the truth until quite a bit later. Jesus Christ, how dumb can you get? Useless. Utterly useless. It was the first instance I'd failed a job. I hadn't just failed it, I'd utterly bombed it. I knew I needed to report into Aisha, but I remember what it felt like as I was taking out my phone. The familiar choking feeling in my throat, my body begging me not to report my failure, fearing retaliation. But I had to do it. As scum as I might be, I had at least to keep Miss Aisha in the loop. Slowly, despite my best instincts, I brought a finger to the call button, and then I reported in. I'm sorry, ma'am. Oh, I failed. Locke got away. I tried my best, I really did, but I failed. I set up an ambush, but he outmaneuvered it. I don't know if he somehow suspected there would be an assassination attempt on his life, or if it was a lucky coincidence, but it was a perfect opportunity that completely threw my plan into disarray. So I tried to finish him off despite the hiccups, but I was unable to catch up and kill him. Ultimately he escaped and I have nothing to show for it. I remember just standing there, feeling an ice-cold ball in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know what punishment was in store for me. I really didn't care on that front, but more than anything I didn't want Aisha to think less of me. I didn't want her to think I wasn't worth anything to her anymore. If she wanted to completely cut me off, well, I couldn't have blamed her, but it would sting. Did he see you? Huh? Did he see you? Did he get a good look at your face? Would he be able to identify you? No, I don't think he would. He got a vague look at me from a distance, but I was wearing a face mask and a hoodie. It was very dark, and he was in a rushed panic. I don't think he could point me out in the lineup. Good. And evidence. What, if any, evidence could link you to the scene? Did you leave any of that? Of course not, ma'am. The ballistic markings left mean I need to acquire a new silenced pistol, but beyond that I made sure not to leave anything that could be forensically tracked back to me. There was a bit more silence. Okay then. Thank you for reporting in. Huh? Is that it? Do you have something else to report? No, nothing else, ma'am. Just I thought you'd be more upset at me. Well, I can't say the news isn't a bit annoying. Locke remains a threat. However, there's no reason to be upset with you. But I was the one who let him get away. Yes, and I'm sure you pursued him to the best of your abilities. Up until this point, you've yet to fail any task I've assigned to you. With that in mind, I'm inclined to believe that this is not a personal failing on your fault, but as you put it, a lucky coincidence. Unlucky coincidence for our part. Unfortunately, sometimes things just happen beyond our control. All we can do is move on from that. But ma'am, because of this failed attempt, Locke knows there's someone out for his life. Already I was unable to secure much information on him. Now it's going to be nearly impossible to find him again. He's probably going to be far more guarded moving forwards. No matter. Locke is quite the ambitious type. There's no doubt in my mind he'll continue to make moves. When he does, I'll be made aware of him, and you'll have another chance to do your job. You'll be made aware? How? Don't worry about that. Just know that you'll have your second chance soon enough. Thank you. I'll make the most of it. I'm sure you will. Anyway, if you're still feeling guilty, you can make up for it with your next job. Next job? When you want me to move on Laverna in the meantime? No, I'm not talking about the optional assignment. We got a bigger fish to fry. Okay. Who's the target? I'm not yet sure, but I do know the client. The client? I know this is a bit unorthodox, but I'm not actually the one requesting your services this time. Huh? Wait, isn't the whole point of this operation that I'm your personal weapon? That's a major part of my power. Indeed. Normally I would utterly loathe the idea of leasing you out to another person, making you nothing more than a contractual killer. However, we found ourselves in something of a bizarre circumstance. This request is coming from one of our chief benefactors. You mean... Indeed, Art was the one who contacted me. My mind was racing at this point. Art? What do you mean? How does he know? What does he know? Settle down, would you? Sorry. I'm just confused. Does he know about us? Not us specifically, I'd imagine. However, he asked pretty bluntly if I had any avenues that could discreetly settle matters, with a lethal touch. Well, I mean, Odin knows, so Art knows, right? Probably. I denied that, of course, but he said he suspected someone in my position did. Then he proceeded, stating that he had a strong need for such services, that he would make lending it to him well worth my while. He even offered 5% of his current stock stake in Olimpo, tunneled through discreet channels, naturally. You accepted his deal for money? Devon, you lack grander sight. It's not what I stand to gain, it's what I could lose. Denying this offer will fray, perhaps even sever the relationship I built with Art. As many donors as I may gather, Olimpo's shadow donations are undeniably the strongest asset I have for winning elections. This one may be a farce, but you can never predict the future. Who knows what storm the next one may bring. Additionally, Olimpo is the largest company in Panthea by a long shot. It brings in jobs, revenue, clout. Frankly, it's putting Panthea on the map, and as governor, maintaining smooth relations with it as an entity is naturally in my best interest. I weighed the pros and cons, and ultimately I decided that offering your services up would be for the best. Will this be an issue for you? I know that the two of you don't exactly have the best history. However, I am trusting that you can be professional and put personal biases aside. Think of it as a job from me. Of course. Naturally, of course I'll do the job, ma'am. I'm sure you've thought it through and decided this is the best course of action. It's just... You have hesitation? No. But do you think Art knew specifically about our relationship? By the way the conversation progressed, I doubt he had that much insight to the exact specifics. Then again, he felt fairly certain I possessed some way to have people dealt with, so I can't be sure. If that's the case, do you think he might be a suspect for the Bell murder? I mean, depending on what he knew. You're still on that? Please, just drop it. I highly doubt Art had anything to do with Maximilian Collins' death. Look, the specifics of the assignment will come shortly. I trust you'll handle it. Thank you for the update. Goodbye. And like that, Aja hung up. That conversation certainly hadn't gone as I expected. Which brought us to the present, doing prep work for Art's assignment, here in the forest. I let out a sigh. I was upset, but now for a different reason. Working under Art. I couldn't blame Miss Aja, of course. She clearly gave it a lot of thought. If she said this was necessary, then by golly it was necessary. Still, on paper we should be fine. I'm an adult, he's an adult. We were both dumb kids. Holding things against the man for what he did when we were under Odin's thumb isn't exactly fair. We'd both grown, but still. I held a seething resentment toward Art for many, many years. Not just because of the impossible standards he set for me and Polly. His whole demeanor was cold and cruel. Was he the Bell Killer? No, that probably didn't seem likely. Apparently Odin didn't know about my involvement until after the kill. Art, perpetual kiss-ass that he is, tells everything to Odin in a constant attempt to score points. Undoubtedly Art would have told Odin that he stumbled across a big secret before now. If anything, likely the opposite has happened, and Art started suspecting Aja had an assassin on deck because of some offhanded comment Odin made to him. Plus, Art was too professional to ever actually kill someone himself. The fact that he was giving up so much to purchase my services was proof enough of that. So yeah, he likely wasn't that loose end. Still didn't mean I had to like working under him. Speak of the devil, he shall appear. I was getting a call. I didn't even need to check to know exactly who it was. I really wasn't in the mood to deal with that. Speaking with him wasn't quite like speaking with Odin, but it was close. It's not like I had a choice, huh? Oh well. Bottoms up. Hello? What do you want, Art? Ah, Devon. It's nice to hear your voice. It's been a while since we've gotten to talk. Likewise. If I was doing this, might as well be civil. To be honest, when I was given this number, I was still somewhat uncertain what I'd hear on the other end. In some weird way, talking directly to you feels oddly comforting. Glad to hear it. Wish I could say the same. Oh, come now. Could we please put the past behind us? Trust me when I say it is a source of embarrassment for us both. I've never done so formally, so let me now extend my apologies for anything I might have done in our youth. That's not it. Oh? It's not because of our previous relationship that I'm not comfortable talking to you on a phone like this. Oh, I see. That makes sense. An assassin is probably loath to come into contact with practically anyone. Understandable. Art was correct, but exposing myself directly to Art felt worse. When I first agreed, I didn't realize I'd be giving away my identity like this. Art probably insisted on this point. He's never been the type to put blind faith in complete strangers. Still, I couldn't help but feel like my role as the unseen man was eroding with every passing moment. First that phone call with Odin, then the reckless encounter with Locke, and now blatantly speaking with Art. Can we just get to work? Of course. As I understand it, you've already have all the required information for the hit. Yes I do. As a matter of fact, I'm scoping out the site right now. Is that so? It's still broad daylight out. Is it safe? I know what I'm doing. Because of your referrer, I'm choosing to place my trust in you. A risky prospect. I trust that you carry out your work in a succinct and professional manner. Seriously? Yes, I'm a professional. Why would you question that? Because I know you, Devon. That in itself is pretty compelling evidence. Do you want me to turn on you? I wanted to say that, but as the words began to leave my mouth, something caused me to freeze up. Even still, I couldn't directly challenge him like that. I know what I'm doing. What I want to know is if you know what you're doing. Excuse me? What exactly are you insinuating? Polly? Polly Dicemas? That's who you want me to kill? Yes, our brother. I trust you're acquainted. Seriously though, what gives? I know you two never got along, but resorting to killing him? You can't certainly think that this is a result of childish rivalry, can you? Of course not. I know you better than that. You never do anything that wasn't carefully considered to bring you the most benefit. Which makes this a bigger question for me. Personal disputes aside, Polly is your brother. Our brother. Push comes to shove, he's gonna support you. That comment, dear brother, shows exactly how out of touch you've become. Well, not like that's particularly a surprise. It's not like you're on top of things in the past. After spending as much time as you have slinking around in the darkness, killing people for money, it tracks that you become utterly clueless. Oh, my bad, that I've checked out of you two dicks measuring competition. What a crass metaphor. So, you know, this is a war over the succession of the Olimpo name, and all the power that comes with it. It's important. It's a war. Is it a war when you've so thoroughly won? That's what I've thought. However, for whatever reason, Polly has decided to pick up the fight. Quite recently, he's taken a shot at me. After more analysis, it's quite clear the recent theft was his doing. Luckily, I covered my tracks well enough. That victory alone won't win him much ground, but the principle of it proves that he plans to go for the jugular. If it was an above-the-belt battle, I'd handle things accordingly. However, since he's proven himself willing to commit crimes to usurp me, I can no longer allow him to roam free. It's too big of a risk. He now poses a threat to succession. I must eliminate that threat. You know, I'm also your brother. Technically speaking, I also prove a threat to your succession. By Devon, I didn't remember you having a proclivity towards humour. How age changes us. Keep it together. Still, murder is a rather drastic option. It is a drastic situation. It isn't you. Let me guess, Odin put you up to this. I make my own decisions. Of course. Of course Odin would never directly advise one of his sons to murder another, but he probably said something like, the helms of Olimpo can only be reigned by one willing to do anything to grasp them. If one poses a threat, then ending them shouldn't be an option. It should be the given course of action. Pretty good Odin there. Well, I also grew up with him. He's right. You always did agree with him. It's not just a matter of staying on top, of running Olimpo. When dealing with stakes as high as this, things can get dangerous. I can end up in jail, or worse, dead. And you know Polly just as well as I do. He can get single-minded, impulsive, historically bad at thinking through the consequences of his actions. Even if he didn't mean it, his attempts to dethrone me could end my life. Getting to him first is a natural precaution. I couldn't help letting out a short chuckle, one that I didn't even know where it came from. I know this is my job, but I was still having trouble understanding what I was hearing from Art. You're really serious, huh? I mean, think about this, Art. Really think about what you're doing. I prefer not to. That's why you should. I know you've done a lot for your quest for power. Probably a lot of shit that I wouldn't want to hear about. But murder? Where are you getting off asking that? You're an assassin. That's different? Look, Art, we're talking about Polly here. We grew up with him. You have an office right next to him. Can you really bring yourself to kill your own brother? I could hear Art audibly breathing, though he didn't say as much. It was clear my line of questioning was affecting him. However, before I could say anything else, he spoke in a quiet voice. That's not what you should be asking, Devon. The question is, can you really bring yourself to kill your own brother? Without another word, Art hung up the phone. He was really monstrous. The Dicemas. What happened to them? What happened to us? Are we really at this point in our lives? To have fallen into this state of things? Maybe that's expected. Maybe we deserve it. No, the one who really deserves things done to them is Odin. And he still sits on an ivory throne. I can't believe it. I truly can't believe it. We're still squabbling, fighting for his approval. We're adults, living full lives, and we're still... I felt myself being sucked back in time. I could feel myself regressing back to when I lived under Odin's roof. When I lived in fear. I remember how much I hated it. I tried to run away, Planned it out and everything. Did it twice. The first time, the moment I stepped outside of the house, Odin was already waiting for me right there. He knew what I was going to do before I did it. The second time was a bit more successful. I stayed away for a couple hours. I knew that Odin would know that I'd left very shortly after I ran away. I thought that if I hid in the forest for a while, that would throw off his search. He'd assume I'd start for the city. However, hours later, Polly caught me hiding in a tree. Odin had put Art and Polly up to looking for me. I never tried running away after that. Art, Polly, they should have been my allies. We should have had a common enemy. But yet they were both always so horrible. Art, he was never dependable. He was always so emotionless, indifferent to my feelings. I was never as smart as him, and he knew it. He lorded it over me. He liked the feeling of superiority he got from it. He never saw anything wrong with following Odin because it was almost never hard for him. It came naturally for him. Of course, he'd leave me behind, but Polly, I should have been able to trust Polly. He hated Odin just as much as me. We should have been able to bond. But we never did. I was the older sibling, but it never felt like that with Polly. Sure, he looked to me as a common ally whenever in a war with Odin, but he bullied me into supporting him. He cut me off whenever he was finally done with his tantrum. I get roped into so much shit because of that, but outside of that, he always looked at me with contempt. He thought I was weird and wouldn't hesitate to point that opinion out. Maybe I was, but still, whenever we worked together on anything, he'd always be a step ahead of me. I needed help keeping up, which would slow him down and annoy him. He could be really mean when annoyed. Unlike Art, he actually hit me. Maybe he thought I could handle it since he was the younger brother, but he became stronger than me very early on. More than anything, Polly was really selfish, like fundamentally self-centered. When Odin offered some prize, his morals be damned, he'd dance to Dad's tune and play hard. That meant tossing me to the side. I remember this one instance that illuminated all of this clearer than anything. We were all pretty young at the time. Odin took us out to this island. He really wanted to test us in a grander fashion. Ahead of time, he'd prepared a scavenger hunt. It was meant to be a test of skills and smarts. We were told to find him, any methods. The faster you got there, the better the prize you got. He had just won a number of things in an inexpensive auction, and he thought those would be fitting bait. If offering ancient relics as prizes to kids didn't illustrate everything you needed to know about Odin's parenting style, I don't know what will. Still, it worked. Polly really liked the European sword and shield set Odin had purchased. Because of that, he decided to take this seriously. Art obviously took it serious. He took every one of Odin's games serious. And me. I didn't really care, but I still wanted to try and prove myself. Prove I was just as good as my brothers. So we began the scavenger hunt. Early on, Art approached me. He said he wanted to team up with me. At the time, Art had never really expressed an interest in working with me before, so I took the bait. Looking back, it was almost certainly because Art feared that there'd be parts of the scavenger hunt that required physical activity. Back then he was pretty weak. I hear he takes exercise pretty seriously though. Anyway, we worked together on the scavenger hunt for a while until eventually we got the last clue. Art arrived to it first, and tore off a piece of it when discovering it. We looked over the remaining clue together, and as I looked more closely at it, tried to interpret it, I didn't notice Art leaving as my back was turned. By the time I realised he was gone, the only one with the full clue. I didn't get mad. I was just sad. But I wasn't giving up. I tried tracking him, following him where he might have gone. It took me a while, but eventually I made my way to this sort of secluded cave. I entered it, and there was a long pathway that led to a turn. I could vaguely hear Odin and Art speaking. This was it. I began entering the cave until right behind me, Polly ran up. When he realised I'd gotten there before him, he got really angry. He rushed over to me, and before I knew what was happening, we were grappling with each other. He shoved me down, and I rolled off the path down the hill to the bottom of the crevice in a cave. My leg bent, and I shouted out in pain. I was seriously injured. I just sat there in pain. Polly moved on, claiming second place. A minute or two later, Odin walked up, with Art and Polly behind him. He looked down at me at the bottom of the hill, and quite simply, he told me to make my way back up with my own power. I tried explaining what had happened to my leg, but he said he didn't care. I made a feeble attempt to climb, but the incline was too steep, and I rolled back down, hitting the back of my head. Polly began to argue with Odin, saying that this was overly cruel. that he should be allowed to help me out. The two got in an argument, which culminated in Odin whacking Polly on the back of the head and Polly running away. He didn't end up helping me at all. I pleaded with Odin just to let someone help me. He stood there silently. Art stood behind him, nervous but quiet. I had no choice but to try and climb, and I failed and rolled back down. But I had to try again, and again, and again, and eventually, through an exhausting amount of energy, I crawled my way back up to the path. I lay there, belly on the ground, panting. Looking down at me, Odin simply asked why I tried the same method over and over again without experimenting. He concluded by saying that at the very least I was able to make it to the path on my own merits. I wasn't completely helpless. Ultimately, Art came in first place. He received that European sword and shield set. He had no interest in it, but I bet the man still keeps it displayed somewhere. Polly came in second place. He received a fancy European vase, flecked with gold. He ended up breaking it not long after, though I forgot if it was a dumb accident or a dumb act of defiance. I came in last place. Odin gave me a crappy kunai. A kunai I still had to this day. And that was the dynamic that infested our household. Odin was king. He'd continuously bully me. He was awful, but smarter than me. Art always prioritized Odin over me. He would help Odin with his bullying. I reached out for help. I reached to Polly, but in the end he'd always rebuke my request. He'd leave for himself. I was trapped with the three of them, completely alone, on my own. Thinking back, I'm pretty sure my spirals started as early as middle school. They were just more mild spirals, like the one I was in right now. I shook my head, snapping back to reality. Standing in the forest close to the house that Polly lived in, acting as an assassin. The Dicemas. They were truly a rotten family. A worthless one. No good could come of them. Could I bring myself to kill a brother? Ha! What a joke. Honestly speaking, I wouldn't have too much trouble ending the life of any Dicema. Might as well prioritize the one that I could actually get paid for. I was thinking about this wrong. I wasn't going to kill my target despite the fact that he was my brother. I got to kill my target and he just so happened to be my brother. Lucky break. This is a good opportunity. Unfortunately, things weren't going to be as simple as usual. Polly Dicema wasn't somebody who could just die and things would move on. He was, without question, the most important person I'd ever been tasked to kill. Didn't seem like that on the outside. He certainly wasn't the most secured, but if he died, there'd be an investigation. There would be an inquisition. A legion of investigators would be tasked with getting to the truth. This wouldn't go away after a few days. The Polly Dicema murder case would be looked into for years. He was just too public a figure. Tying him to the Cock Robin murders was just not viable. That would increase the mystique and danger of the Cock Robin killer to unimaginable levels. So, how to deal with this? There was a number of stories I thought about. What if he was an unintended casualty of a duet fight? There were a number of ways I could frame duet members, and making the duets responsible for this would mean that people were less eager to poke around, lest they anger the duets. But making it look like a duet accident was a lot of work. A lot of careful work. And the duets would know the truth. Sure, maybe that doesn't sound like it should matter. I mean, it's the duets' word against nobody's. Clear who wins that. Still, anyone knowing the truth is too dangerous. So what about an accidental death? One of Polly's sports cars could have a loose brake wire. Accidents happen. But if Polly died, no matter the cause, his matters would be investigated. If he really was in conflict with Art, that would come up, and people would question the timing. An accident right as things were heating up? That wouldn't feel right. They'd look into the accident closer, and as many methods as there were to make a death look accidental, none are completely without traces. They was talented, but even I couldn't guarantee a death to look 100% accidental. Another option would be a natural cause of death. There were poisons that could imitate strokes or heart attacks quite accurately. They were expensive, hard to get, but I knew the avenues. I could get them if I really put my mind to it. Polly hadn't exactly lived a healthy life. That'd be plausible. But this ran into the exact same problem I had with the accidental death idea. The timing was just too suspicious. And just like how I knew about these poisons, so too did investigators. If during an autopsy they decided to specifically look for them, they'd show up. So then, was there just not an answer? Was anything I did too suspicious? No. There was one thing that would work quite nicely. It wouldn't raise suspicion with the timing. No one would know the truth. It wouldn't be out of line with what was known about Polly, and no evidence would be left. The fate I had in mind for Polly was that of a drunken suicide. He was already known to get in an impulsive state when drunk. His behaviour had changed recently. This might seem weird for such a positive person to suddenly decide to end themselves, but plenty of seemingly positive people were hiding in darkness. Of course, I knew that Polly was far too self-centered to ever really consider suicide, but it would be plausible, especially with the right note. I had plenty of samples of Polly's handwriting. I knew intimate details about his life, using credit card records provided to me by Art. I knew the type of paper in Polly's household. I also got a pen that he often used in the Olympo office, one that had his fingerprints all over them. It took a lot of careful crafting, but with time and patience I forged a perfect suicide note that'd be left by his hanging body. I explained the motive for why he took his life in just the right amount of detail, written in the style and tone as Polly. Now, it's just a matter of actually hanging Polly up like that, and while not leaving any evidence of my presence. Difficult? Sure, but not impossible, especially not if you knew what you were doing. If you were careful, crafty, researched. So I did a lot of on-site inspection right now. In the trees I was circling the building Polly currently resided in, looking for any oddities on the outside. Of course I already knew the insides pretty well. This building used to belong to Veronica Collins. Veronica Collins? Maximilian Collins' aunt. Was it possible that there was some connection? No, probably not. For all his flaws, I didn't peg Polly as a killer. More to the point, I highly doubted he was intelligent enough to figure out what the deal was with the cock robin killings. Anyways, I took it upon myself to draw up the blueprints of Veronica Collins' old house, so I knew exactly what I was getting into. Of course, blueprints weren't everything. Polly had plenty of time to potentially add new security measures. That's why the spectral thermo camera was for. A rather high-end piece of tech, not something I'd usually find myself in possession of. However, for a potential assassin, this thing was vitally important. With proper setup, you could scan through walls and stuff and highlight areas with more energy than expected. Basically, it showed all the people and technology present. The scan revealed that at present nobody was home. It also showed a lot of technology. Some things that could only be presumed to be cameras. Security cameras, almost certainly set up by Polly as a preventative measure. Luckily, none were where they needed to be to actually stop me. Actually, these cameras were good for me. They proved nobody entered the house. It would lend credence to the suicide story I was setting up. Cool. So the question is, how then did I plan to get in? There were a number of potential entrances, however the slightest sign of forced entry and say bye-bye to the suicide story. There were ways to hide those signs of forced entry, but then the way to hide them had traces themselves. I could try getting a copy of the key, but again they could leave a trace. Also, most of the doors went in areas that cameras covered. Now, the trick to getting in rested on the second floor of the house. In the special research I did in Veronica Collins' house, see, the windows all had their interior locks that prevented them from being open. They slid back and forth. These types of locks were commonplace. As luck would have it, the window locks in Veronica Collins' house had very special property to them. They were made with a specific metal, a metal that was not magnetic in most cases. However, charging a certain magnet with a certain charge could produce magnetic-like properties. With a bit of magnetism from the outside of the window, I'd just give the lock a bit of a turn and like that, the defences would crumple. There was a window on the second floor that led to the bathroom, right next to the room Polly slept in. Getting to that window was also pretty easy. I mean, it took a bit of dexterity, but it was well within my skill set. The plan was simple. Climb up to the second floor window, use magnetism to unlock the lock, sneak into that room, into Polly's room discreetly. There would be the fake suicide. Now there is the question of how to hang him. There's a difference between strangulation and hanging. Funnily enough though, for a professional it's not really as much of a problem as people might make it out to be. But the noose, if you're careful enough, you can strangle someone in a way that is indistinguishable from hanging when checked on an autopsy. As always, I did my research. I mean, there was the chance that something could go wrong at this stage of the murder. It was always at risk, but unless I really flubbed it, it would at least be plausible to be a death by hanging. The suicide note should help push that narrative. At that point, it was just a matter of exiting the same way I entered. Lock the window, down the house. In the middle of the night, Polly would die. Not a trace of evidence that could link me back would be left. Even with all this precaution, the death would still be looked into. How could it not? There was simply no way to get around that when the objective was killing Polly. The trick was controlling what the investigators would find. And with this, all evidence they'd find would suggest that Polly killed himself. That was the conclusion they'd reach. If I was lucky, that investigator lady Laverna might even show up. It seems like the sort of case she'd be interested in. And if that was the case, there was a chance I could get a 2-for-1. Not at the scene, of course, God no. But stalking you when she leaves, a surreptitious encounter on the street. She was someone who could die with a lot less eyebrows being raised. Hell, if I disappeared the body, I doubt anyone would even look into her case. I'd pulled back out the kunai and flipped it again. After all this time, I still had the damn thing. Even if it reminded me of that scavenger hunt. I guess I just like flipping this thing. A vague memory flickered in the back of my mind. What was this thing's story again? I somehow remembered Odin ranting about it. Apparently it was called Gungniri. It was said to be some part of a set Built by a master blacksmith of olden times, these kunai were said to be so finely honed, so masterfully built that anyone could use them flawlessly. If it was flung at a target, then no matter what circumstance got in the way, the kunai would eventually pierce where it needed to pierce. Doesn't matter about the distance, the time, the skill, eventually the Gungniri's blow would strike true. If that was really true, then why was I putting so much effort into my assassination attempts? Really, I should just be thinking of my target's name and throwing this kunai and waiting for them to die. Simple as that, right? As if. The world wasn't built on myths and legends. It was built on hard work and due diligence. You don't kill someone by praying with a magical weapon. You do it by murdering them with your own 2 hands. I've done so many times in the past, and I'd do it again on my own brother. I couldn't hesitate. I couldn't falter. I had to be a human Gungniri. I had to be launched at Polly. Soon enough, I'd land true. Want to hear a riddle? No. Cool, you're hearing one anyways. This is a good one. What's the greatest assassin of all time? The one that never fails to kill their mark. The one you can't run from. The one you can't hide from. The one who kills indiscriminately. The one who tries to fight. The one we fight and we all try to fight. The one we fight in vain. The Grim Reaper. Got it yet? If not, here's a little hint. Each hurts, the last kills. Bit of an abstract hint, I'll admit, but you're a smart cookie. I'll give you a second to think. Okay, got it? If you said time, you'd be correct. The greater killer of us all. Though perhaps it's an unfair reading. And if we blame all deaths on time, can we credit all births to time? I'm not sure if it works that way. It's all abstract shit anyway, so I suppose it doesn't particularly matter. As for that saying, I believe it's referring to seconds. Maybe hours? I'm not sure. Either fits. After all, it's a sundial motto. If you get some free time, try looking up sundial mottos. They are dark without fail. Time flies, the hour flees. Make haste, but slowly. Look at my shadow and you'll see your life. An hour passes slowly, the years quickly. Time devours all. Umbra sumus. Ugly stuff, huh? I'm not sure why I only said the last one in Latin, but they're all originally Latin. And if I was going to go Latin with any of them, clearly I should have picked Mox Nox. That's just fun to say. Sorry, sundials, right? Anyway, I like picturing time as an ever-flowing torrent of water aimed directly at us all. It fills the cracks within us, pushing them until we break. Of course, the earlier you get those cracks, the more damage time will do to you. Poor Devon. He was cracked from the very start. And we didn't get another key again. So I guess we're doing Devon's one again next time. Till then, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next episode.